Shopping at a thrift store or a garage sale or an antique store is not only a great way to save a couple of bucks, it's a great way to turn something as mundane as shopping for household goods into an adventure. But what happens when that adventure turns straight horror with an item you bring home?
What's that? You want to be scared? Come with me. You will experience tales of horror, ghosts, and death. It is not recommended for the weak at heart. Listen in the dark. It's more fun that way. This is Weekly Spooky.
Hello, my spookies. It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. It's time for a little spooky in your weekly. And this week's story is one I really enjoyed. This one is what I like to refer to as simply spooky. It's a story that's got creepy elements, likable characters, and leaves you with a little chill in your bones. And that's what we're all about here at Weekly Spooky. But before we get to the story, I want to take a quick moment to say thank you so very much for listening. I really do appreciate it. What we do here at Weekly Spooky matters a whole lot to me, and I think it matters a lot to many of you too. So, thank you for tuning in, listening to something scary, and getting a little escape from the mundane of life, or maybe the harsh realities that we all have to face as adults. Now, that all being said, if you want to support the show, we would appreciate it greatly. You can go to weeklyspooky.com and find merchandise, or even join our Patreon for as little as $1 a month. You can get 2 bonus shows every single month and my undying gratitude. And if you want to support us in a way that costs you absolutely nothing, and I do mean nothing, just go to your favorite podcasting app such as Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave us a 5-star rating. Those ratings help other spookies find the show. And if you want to have a community of spookies to hang out with, head over to Facebook and type in Weekly Spookies Tomb of Terror. It's a Facebook group where a lot of us all hang out. We share scary stories, funny memes, and so much more. It's absolutely free and it's a wonderful community. I'd love to see you there. So go to facebook.com and type in Weekly Spookies Tomb of Terror. But now, my spookies, it's about time for the scary story. So get comfortable. It's starting right after these quick words. Thrifting fail. We're now haunted by Bruce Haney. Sarah and Keith's day had been a bust. The young couple had spent the day thrifting and hitting yard sales while trying to find a new vacuum cleaner for their apartment. While they searched, they used half a tank of fuel, went to lunch, and had a good time. But they never did find a reasonably priced vacuum that was to their liking. And for what the day ended up costing them, they could have had a new one shipped to their door. Sarah was excited about her finds. She found a dress that looked new at a thrift store and found a small lamp at a garage sale. Keith was both frugal and particular, so he didn't find much. But on their way home, after they had decided they were done for the day, they saw a sign for a yard sale. "Want to hit it?" Keith asked, then made the turn before she had time to respond. "Sure. Might still find a vacuum," Sarah said. "Wouldn't that be nice?" Keith responded. It had been a lovely day, but as they approached the house with the tables and junk on their lawn, a few clouds in the sky began to shift. They drifted in front of the sun, blocking it and bringing darkness to the street. The yard sale had nothing that interested Sarah, but Keith was drawn to an amateur-looking homemade ceramic bowl. She thought it was ugly, but it was only $1 and Keith was going home with something, so she kept her mouth shut for the time being. Back at their apartment, "What are you going to do with that thing?" Sarah asked. "I don't know," Put my keys and wallet in it when I come home, I guess, Keith answered. Okay, Sarah said. I was just kind of drawn to the thing. It is kind of cool looking with its uneven shape and poor execution. It's like punk rock pottery, Keith said while turning it over. I'm surprised that it even has a maker's mark on it, Keith continued. A maker's mark? Sarah asked. Yeah, like how an artist signs their paintings. Someone who does pottery signed the bottom of the piece or stamps their logo or what have you. This one is marked Sylvester, Keith said, and then laughed. Sylvester? Sarah asked. Yep, Keith responded. Like the actor? I have never heard of someone having that name in real life, Sarah laughed. Pretty sure it's not the actor. Keith joined in the laughter. It wasn't long after that. Strange things started to happen in their apartment. The first thing, though it went unnoticed by the two, was that the ceramic bowl was never exactly where it was left. It moved an inch or two each time they would leave the room. Keith was the first to notice it, but figured that Sarah had just bumped it. One night when Keith woke up to use the restroom, he found the ceramic piece on the floor. His first fear was that someone had broken in and took his wallet and keys. But he checked, and they were where he left them, just no longer in the bowl. Keith woke up Sarah. She knew nothing about it, so they searched the apartment together looking for other disturbances. With none found, they checked the locks and that the windows were secured before they laid back in bed to go to sleep. 10 minutes later, their alarm went off. It was time to get up for work. When they came home, they felt a false sense of security because the ceramic piece hadn't moved. Well, it had moved a little, but not enough for it to register to them. It was Friday night, so they stayed up watching spooky movies despite their recent experiences. It had been a long week, and they got so little sleep the night before, so before the credits could roll on the first flick, they were fast asleep on the couch. Sarah was the first to wake up and was about to wake up Keith to drag him to bed when she noticed the ceramic bowl sitting on her TV tray. It was next to the diet soda and the oil-free corn-based crackers she had been munching on. Sarah shook Keith to point it out to him. They searched the apartment again, leaving their bedroom for last. They didn't find anything. So they were just about to head to their bedroom when Sarah decided to run back to the living room and grab the ceramic bowl. What are you doing? Keith asked. Sarah said nothing as she walked to the kitchen and put the bowl in the freezer. Let's see it move around the apartment now. She gave Keith a little smile and headed to their room. In their room, there was a shape under their blanket. The shape of a large man. When Keith hit the light switch, the shape deflated and the blanket fell back to the bed. That night they slept on the couch using a spare blanket from the closet so they didn't have to use the one from their bed. It was a bit thin and scratchy, but it wasn't recently involved in a haunting, so they made do. Sarah again was the first one to awaken, but this time it was because of the cold feeling she felt on her right shoulder. When she opened her eyes, she saw a big man standing in front of her, leaning over and touching her shoulder. The cold radiated from that spot, and she began to feel chills all over. She knew the person touching her wasn't of this world because she could see through him, and there was a blue glow surrounding him. Sarah looked him over, noticing his disheveled appearance. His apron, his shirt, and pants were covered in paint and bits of clay from where he had used them to wipe his hands off while working. His teeth chattered as he spoke. "Sorry to disturb you, miss, but I'm freezing," the ghost pleaded. Sarah just stared at him, never taking her eyes off the apparition as she hit Keith to wake him up. By the time Keith awoke, it had lost its courteous demeanor, and a scowl began to form on his face. Keith screamed when he saw him. Then the ghost screamed while moving his gaze from Sarah to Keith. "I'm cold!" the ghost yelled. "What?" Keith stammered. "I said I am freezing!" As the ghost began to head towards Keith, something clicked in Sarah's head. She jumped from the couch and ran to the freezer, where she opened the door and grabbed out the ceramic bowl. She then turned around to show the ghost. But he was gone. Sarah and Keith spent the next morning driving around trying to find the house they had bought the bowl from so they could return it. Sarah was sure she knew the way, but without the signs and the tables of junk in the yard, it was hard to determine which house it was. Eventually, they agreed on a house that they believed it could be. Nobody answered the door, but they had been expecting that after spotting the for sale sign on the lawn. "What do we do now?" Keith asked. "I don't know. I don't think we're going to get any answers this way. We should just throw it out," Sarah responded. Before they went back home, they stopped at the coffee shop where they had their first date. It was Sarah's turn to buy, so Keith found them a comfortable spot to sit so they could talk. While he waited for her, he got on his phone and did a couple of quick searches. When Sarah came with their coffees, he was ready to tell her what he'd found out. As she handed him his quad shot over ice, he told her all about Sylvester. "I don't know the connection to that house, but I think I found information on our Sylvester. He was actually a respected artist," Keith said. "But that thing was so amateurish," Sarah argued. "True. Do you remember when you first started painting last summer?" Keith asked. "Oh, God, I'm glad I tossed all those awful early paintings," Sarah replied. "Well, Sylvester, like you, got much better. According to his Wikipedia page..." "Wait, he has a Wikipedia page? It's not the actor, is it?" Sarah interrupted. "No, it's not the actor. His name was Sylvester Helm. Displays of his paintings and ceramics can be found in museums all over the world," Keith said, reading a sentence from his Wikipedia page. "You bought that thing for $1. How can you be so sure it's the same guy?" Sarah asked. Keith responded by handing her his phone. On the screen was a picture of his maker's mark on the bottom of a ceramic piece. "It does look similar, but that could easily be faked," Sarah said with a little doubt in her voice. "Scroll," Keith said. Sarah did until she saw a photo of the artist, who bore more than a striking resemblance to the frozen man she had seen in their apartment. "Yeah, I think it's him," Keith said. "Crazy," Sarah said. "Keep scrolling to the death section," Keith instructed. Sarah read the short blurb out loud. "Sylvester Leroy Helm is assumed dead. The artist was last seen in 2010 at an antiquarian book fair. Helms had been a lifetime collector of rare and obscure books of the occult. After his disappearance, his aunt became the heir to his fortune and reported that many of his rare books were missing. A death in absentia was completed in 2017, as he is presumed dead." Wow, so what does all that mean? Why does that equal us being haunted? Sarah asked Keith in a whisper so other people in the coffee shop wouldn't hear. "I don't know. I don't think we have enough pieces of the puzzle to figure it out," Keith said. "So we need to figure out what the next step is to figure this out," Sarah said. "Or we just don't pursue this further," Keith said. "Why not?" Sarah inquired. "Have you ever read H.P. Lovecraft? Or watched The Blair Witch Project?" Keith asked. "No and yes," Sarah responded. "Okay, good. Have you ever noticed that trend in horror movies that have a deep lore or mystery to them? That as the people search, they become more and more screwed and eventually go mad, disappear, or get killed. I mean, look at Sylvester here. He did just that. He looked for evil until it found him. Now, he's stuck in the worst piece of art he ever created. Yes, I want to know what happened, but I'm not trading this beautiful life we built together for that," Keith said. So what do we do? Sarah asked. Could destroy it, Keith said. But we don't know what that will do. Look what happened when we put it in the freezer. What if it appears in front of us all mutilated and gross from being broken apart? Sarah said. Do you think that's what'll happen? Keith asked. We have no clue, and without further research, we won't, Sarah said. When they arrived back at the apartment, Sarah took the bowl out of her purse and set it on the counter. What can we do for you? Sarah whispered towards it, not wanting Keith to hear her. No response came, so she followed it up with another question. Are you stuck? Sarah asked. Again, no response. Keith walked into the room and saw her talking to the bowl and decided that he had a plan. Keith walked over and snatched up the bowl, then headed to the front door. What are you doing? Sarah asked. I'm going to throw it away, Keith responded. But what about when it goes into the garbage truck and gets smashed? It seems like, from the freezer situation, he can feel pain. That wouldn't be right for us to do. He is scary, but I'm not sure he's evil, Sarah explained. Keith thought about this for a moment. What if I just leave it on the side of the street? Keith asked. Same result. It'll end up in the trash, Sarah responded. Okay. How about I give it to a thrift store? Keith asked. Okay, yeah, I'm okay with that, Sarah said. That plan didn't work. By the time they arrived home after donating it, it was back on their counter. Later that night, they went back to plotting how to get rid of the thing. After the scare of the cabinet, Sarah was warming up to the idea of just destroying the thing. There must be another way. Why is it attached to us? What makes us so special? Keith asked. We bought it, Sarah responded. They both stared at each other for a moment. That was the key. The purchase is what had attached them to it. We have to sell it, Sarah told him. Yeah, we might even make a pretty penny being that it's an authentic Sylvester Helms piece. But every auction house and antique store laughed at them when they presented the piece. Nobody believed that it could be the work of the renowned Sylvester Helms. So, they did what anyone else would do in that situation. They threw it up on a popular online auction site and hoped for the best. That night, they didn't wake up when their covers were pulled from them. Sarah did wake up when she felt a hand on her ankle. She woke up Keith with her screams and the loud bang that came from her body, hitting the floor. They both knew things were escalating, and they hoped it would sell quickly. They watched the auction eagerly, but Sarah began to have a change of heart. I'm not sure it's right to sell it, Sarah said. I don't care if it is. You could have gotten really hurt, Keith responded. The ankle incident was scary, but is it fair to curse someone else with this? What if something worse happens to them? Sarah asked. What if they knew it was haunted? Would it be okay then? Keith asked. Yeah, then they know what they're getting into. I think that would be fair, Sarah responded. With that, Keith changed the title of the listing to Haunted Ceramic Bowl, Scary Item. Then, in the description, he wrote about what had happened to them. Then, something told him to list the item higher. Asking $150 instead of $8 would make it feel more legitimate. An hour later, the item sold. The next day, they mailed the package off, and they never saw the ceramic bowl or the ghost again. With the $150, they bought a new vacuum cleaner and swore off thrifting, antiquing, and all yard sales from then on out. I hope you enjoyed that story as much as I enjoyed reading it to you, and a big thank you to our good buddy Bruce Haney, who has sent in 2 more stories that I'll be narrating in the very near future. Bruce has a flair for the spooky that I'm glad he's expanding on by sharing more stories with us. I also want to mention over on Patreon, we are getting close to the end of our first Patreon-exclusive series, The Weekend. That's right, it's a 12-part series that takes place in Strickfield. Available only on Patreon. It's all about a group of camping teenagers who decide to break into a campground that's been abandoned. And what they find is not necessarily fun in the sun, but blood and revenge. And you can hear it exclusively at Patreon by going to weeklyspooky.com and clicking on Patreon, subscribing for as little as $1 a month. You get 2 installments, and there's a brand new series coming as soon as The Weekend wraps up, another Strickfield Universe series, but this one has a lot more installments, but we'll get to that soon. But speaking of Patreon, I want to say an extra special thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters. These are folks who pay just a little bit more to hear their names at the end of the show. And they are Johnny Nix, John Callan, Bobbletopia.com, Jenny Green, Brent McCullough, Karen Ouimet, Jack Kerr, and Craig Cohen. And hey, our good buddy Craig Cohen, he's going to be coming out from Philadelphia to hang out with us for the big eclipse that's going to be hitting the Dayton, Ohio area. So I'm looking forward to hanging out with you, Craig. And if you want to get your name on the end of every episode, just go to weeklyspooky.com, click on Patreon, and select a tier at $15 a month or higher. It really helps the show keep going and going and going. But really, all I need from you is your ears and your fears. So for myself, for my producer Dan Wilder, my composer Ray Mattis, and my executive producers Mark Shields and Robert Fields, I will talk at you next time. Thank you so much. I love, love, love scaring you.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to find your way back next week. But for now, you are safe. Trust me.